What's up, marketing legends, and welcome to another episode of the Growth Colony podcast. I'm producer Liza from Xgrowth to tell you that each episode we bring in B2B leaders to chat about how you can achieve those everyday wins in the marketing world. Whether you're new to the B2B game, working at a leadership level, or even just showing some interest, we know you'll love the episode. So wherever you are, get comfy and enjoy the show.
Hi everyone, welcome to a very special episode of Growth Colony's podcast where I'm joined by Ashley, the head of Lifecycle Marketing at Atlassian. But the reason I'm excited is because of what Ashley stands for. If you've heard the term thought leader, and I imagine that's everyone that's listening, you'll want to stick around. Ashley holds a senior marketing position at a global Australian business, but spends part of her time diving deep into the mechanics of what actually makes a thought leader. A term that gets thrown around, in my opinion, far too loosely by businesses today without really understanding what it is, the importance or lack of importance it has or can have, what goes into being a thought leader, and how to become or maintain being one, if that's your jam. Ashley has ripped this topic apart in a good way, modeled it, and put it back together again. And we're going to go on a hopefully exciting conversation to pick at the fabulous brain behind the research to see what we can learn. Ashley, have I still got you? How was that? Are you mad?
Man, I'm excited about this journey. I'm like, man, who is this person that's like ripped it apart and has a whole model? Like, I want to talk to this person. Man, I have a lot to live up to now.
Hey, there's you're being coy. You're being coy.
I believe in myself. Usually I err on the side of being kind of arrogant. So we're trying the humility thing first.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's probably the cottage cheese talking.
Exactly. My afternoon snack. We're pretending to be healthy too. So,
yeah, exactly.
It's balance.
It's all about balance. Actually, I came across you on LinkedIn, obviously. One of my colleagues tagged me in one of your posts where you were breaking down what goes into the anatomy of being a thought leader. And as a result, being someone that's very excited about truly understanding what a thought leader actually is, what it means to be one, what goes into being one, I had to drop a comment on your post, reach out, and organically we've ended up on this conversation being recorded. And I want to say thank you for giving me your time. Everyone that's listening to this across the Asia Pacific region, if you haven't heard of Ashley, give her a follow on LinkedIn. She talks absolute sense and brings a lot of things to light in a really easy to understand, broken down way that you can ultimately prosper from. But let's get into it. So you are at Atlassian.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about your role, where you're at, how things are going. What do you do?
Sure. Things are going great. So I've been at Atlassian for quite a while now. I've held a number of different roles in content marketing, in product marketing, and then now I sit in lifecycle marketing. So really thinking about what is that full audience journey. And that does have some elements of it that dovetail with thought leadership. Some of the models and things that I've created from a thought leadership perspective dovetail more specifically with my roles in content. But in terms of thinking about how thought leadership influences the audience journey, where does it fit? How do you measure it? Why do you need it from a content and asset perspective? How do you build it from a people perspective? And then how do you distribute it? Where does it fit into that journey? Does fit into my current role in lifecycle marketing. So I manage a team, and then I also do a fair amount of nerding out on LinkedIn, as you note, about various marketing frameworks and audience journey elements to make it truly something that reflects how people interact, buy, stay, use products today.
That's right. And, I think I may have gone a bit too strong on the thought leadership side of things, because that's not all you talk about, right? You talk about things that are relevant across the entire life cycle of user experience, of customer experience, of marketing, sales. Where does everything fit in, and how does everything connect together with with a bit of a focus on, would you say that the digging into the thought leadership side of things is an area of passion for you? Is it an area of interest over and above other elements? Not to get you in trouble or put you in a box, but is it? Am I right in thinking that it is somewhere that you spend a large portion of your time geeking out, as you say?
I mean, I can't pick a favorite child here, Vinny. You're making the other framework sad, but I do love to nerd out about thought leadership. What I find, to your point, is, earlier in the introduction where you said this is a term that gets thrown around a lot. And because it is so misunderstood and misused, that has significant implications on that audience journey, how we approach it as marketers, how we create it, how we work with people who are thought leaders, other types of creators who we want to say are thought leaders, but are not in fact thought leaders. And so I do geek out on it from a framework perspective, but I actually feel that it's highly integrated to all of the rest of the work that I do, even if I'm not necessarily focusing on this specific execution of this work as much anymore. I do think from a strategy standpoint and from a mindset standpoint, it has significant implications across the span of marketing. So yes, I do love to geek out about it, but I do find that it's highly integrated to the other elements that I talk about.
The question that I want to ask you is, which I've seen some people ask you on your content or comment, etc., is would you agree or disagree? And I'm sort of assuming that you're going to come back to me with a humble response here. But we're going to break down what we believe thought leadership actually is in a second. But would you say that it's quite interesting that you are taking what the majority of people would say is a thought leadership approach to breaking down the very topic of thought leadership as a topic? Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair to say. One thing that's interesting, you actually phrased this question in a way that doesn't make me immediately go, no. Normally, the way this question is phrased is like, are you a thought leader on thought leadership? And my immediate answer is no. According to my own framework, I do not score high enough across the 4 pillars that I've laid out to actually call myself a thought leader. And I think that's one of the nice things about using the framework. And again, I'm going to foreshadow it a little bit here. The 4 pillars are credibility, profile, being prolific, and depth of ideas. I don't actually score high enough according to my own pillars to be a thought leader. And so that ability to take an objective approach, this is not a subjective mindset of like, well, I think I'm smart. I think I have a big audience. I think I'm saying new and interesting things, right? No, objectively, if you look at the proof points that show that you are making progress in these pillars, I am not at the highest level of proof points for these things.
Of your model. Yeah,
according to my model, I would say, like, according to my model, I am not I am not hitting the proof points to be a thought leader. So it is funny. It is an interesting thing to come up with a framework for thought leadership, because that is that like circular, it's thought leadership on thought leadership. And I'm like, well, yes, but the joke is the first rule of being a thought leader is you don't call yourself a thought leader, right? And then the second rule I would say is look at my pillars, look at the proof points, honestly score yourself.
Yeah.
And this is another misconception. People think that being smart or being good at your job automatically makes you a thought leader. That is incorrect. People think that having a large following automatically makes you a thought leader. That is also incorrect. So I'm not saying that I'm not smart. I'm not saying that I'm not good at my job. What I'm saying is, based on the proof points I've laid out, according to my own framework, I'm not a thought leader. So it's a really interesting and nuanced view that I think a lot of people just throw that term around and they don't actually want to dig in and be like, okay, what does this actually mean? What are the implications of moving up in each pillar? And why does that matter from a marketing mix standpoint as well?
Okay, great. So this is a nice segue. So the first question I have for you, in a sentence, we're going to get into the specifics throughout this time. We've got time, but in a sentence, how do you define thought leadership? And I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to come back and forth on this a bit with you from my perspective, just word of warning. But in a sentence, from your perspective, how do you define the term thought leadership?
It's actually very simple. Have thoughts, be a leader. And you have to have both. There are a lot of people who have very smart thoughts. They are not being a leader. There are a lot of people who are leading. They have no thoughts. Therefore, they are not a thought leader. So you have to have both. At its core, have thoughts, be a leader.
Okay. So quick question then, because this has come up in my head about 3 times since we've started. Can you be a thought leader if you're dumb?
I think it depends on what you mean by dumb. So,
well, so in the opposition of the term smart. So I don't mean any offense to anyone that's listening, right? But in direct comparison of a lot of people to what you said, a lot of people think that, oh, I'm smart, I have thoughts, therefore I can be a thought leader. So just black and white here, and I know it's not black and white, but black and white, can you not be smart, or in other words, dumb, right? But still be a thought leader based on your framework. I'm trying to cut the wheat from the chaff here of all the people that are listening that might think that they're super smart and that they have to be smart in order to be a thought leader. Can you, in fact, not have to be smart?
I do think that you have to be smart. I think I would take a different approach to what counts as smart. So, as I mentioned earlier, one of the pillars is around depth of ideas. And I see this as a mistake a lot where this would be something where I think is a anti-pattern that falls into kind of what you might be saying is dumb. Uh-huh. Being contrarian doesn't automatically make you a thought leader, right? So,
sorry to cut you off, but being contrarian means thinking outside the box, thinking in a different way, thinking unilaterally as opposed to just following the herd.
I would actually, in the way I'm describing it, I'm actually thinking of it, I'm defining contrarian as basically saying the opposite. So in the truest sense of the word, if I say something that is contrary, I'm basically saying something that is different than you or the opposite of you. So what a lot of people think is they'll just take whatever the best practices are and they'll just say the opposite. So for example, this comes up a lot, with people declaring tactics or channels dead. SEO is dead. Email is dead. MQLs are dead. Now I'm a thought leader. Now I'm smart, right? Like you're using an MQL. MQLs are wrong. I've said the opposite, but I have not, in fact, introduced a new way for you to think, a new way for you to take action, or in any way codified what I'm saying is the alternative in a way that you can actually take new action. So that's where I would say, yes, you do have to be smart. And it is doing things that are new and innovative, having that unique perspective. It has to be informed. It has to be opinionated. It has to be proven from an experience standpoint. It can't just be saying the opposite and just declaring things, right? So that's another piece of this from a framework perspective. There are a lot of people who claim that I know what thought leadership is. Okay, what is it then? And they'll throw out some words, but they don't actually give you any proof points or tactics or ways to improve, ways to measure. I'm not saying my framework is the only framework or that it's 100% right. There's plenty of people who've poked holes on it. I've evolved my thinking in some areas on the framework itself, but I've at least codified it in a way that you can take action. And based on the feedback I've received from it, people are like, this is interesting. This is new. This is different than what the market is saying. It's not just, I said the opposite. So that's where I think the question of can you be dumb? I think a lot of people use devil's advocate or being contrarian or just taking the opposite stance as a dumb approach and calling that thought leadership, but it's missing some key elements to actually truly make it thought leadership.
I mean, what I'm hearing is, and I would have thought, personally, I would have thought that this was, blindingly obvious, that if you just go against the grain, say something with absolutely no substance and claim to start thinking that you are, in fact, a thought leader, which, bearing in mind, we're yet to get into the definition based on your pillars at this stage. But forget the term thought leader in this instance. If you just say the opposite thing to what people are saying and claim that is the right way to go in terms of putting a message out there to try and gain followership, to try and gain, attention on what it is that you're saying, to me, that's pretty dumb. That is just plain stupid, right? Because you have no sustenance, you have nothing to back it up. If you have something to say, especially in the arena of B2B or positioning yourself as a subject matter expert, which is what also something else that we're going to get into. If you're trying to have a point of view, quite simply in its most basic form, if you're trying to have a point of view on something, you have to have a point of view. You can't just throw out empty statements and then all of a sudden, expect hundreds of thousands of followers to follow what it is that you're saying. Anyone that does follow that emptiness are also pretty dumb because it doesn't make any sense, right? It's probably seen as clickbaity, if anything. At best, it's clickbaity stuff. Did you have something in response to what I just said, or?
Yeah, I think what you're saying in terms of, I think it's blindingly obvious. I will say that, and again, I spend a fair portion of my time on LinkedIn as my platform of choice. There are a lot of people who throw things out there. I mean, if you've heard this of kind of like the hustle bro culture, where it's like, get up at 5 a.m., cold plunge, journal, run 20 miles, right? Sure, those are fine habits,
Yeah, have 5 matcha teas before 5 a.m.
Yeah. That would be the type of thing that I would say is like kind of contrarian, where people will say like, everyone says you need work-life balance. I say you need work-life hustle. Sure, I agree, I guess, if you work more, but actually no, there's science that says at a certain point you start losing your productivity if you're not sleeping, and if you're focusing too long, you don't take walks, right? But there is definitely a flavor of that. And I think there's more backlash on it now because it's a known formula. But particularly in the earlier days of social media, people couldn't detect that clickbait or that emptiness before. And they genuinely thought, wow, this person has a silver bullet, right? And so that's why I do call it out as the contrarian thing, especially because there's a lot of people who, as a personal brand choice, choose this like sarcastic, contrarian, devil's advocate persona. And while depth of ideas and saying something new and being at the forefront of your industry, asking people to think and act in a new direction or introducing a new idea, that is going to ruffle some feathers. That's an outcome. That's not a driver. That's not the thing that makes the idea interesting or useful or novel. Is just the fact that no one's ever heard of it. I could come out and say a bunch of nonsense and people would be like, I've never heard this, but also it makes zero sense, right? So that's why I pull that out there as an example of like some of the stuff that I do still see happening that is not thought leadership.
Yeah, in its most basic form, it's a hook without any substance, right? It hooks people in, oh, that sounds interesting, or, oh, that's playing into my insecurities as someone that doesn't know enough about this topic. What can I learn from this person? Good-willed, bad-willed, whatever you want to call it, but without any backup or substance behind the claims that you're making, that doesn't instantly make you a thought leader. So let's have a quick piece around thought leadership, subject matter expert, influencer, or clickbaity unknown person, right? Sort of thing. So you've got your model that breaks down into what goes into being a thought leader. You and I have had a couple of previous conversations, very lightly touched on around the other status achievements that you can arrive at, I suppose. The way I see thought leadership is the pied de resistance, the absolute icing on the cake from a B2B marketing, sales, executive position as to what a lot of those people want to try and achieve. Thought leadership, right there at the top. Right? And we're going to get into what breaks down thought leadership. But would you agree with me that there are other stages that you can arrive at before getting there? I see you nodding, so I'm going to keep talking. The way I see it is that you've got, if you can imagine a quadrant, and you've got bottom left, you've got sort of zero influence, you've got zero sort of status, zero thoughts, really just kind of spectator level, right? You're looking, and that's not a bad thing. It's just that is what it is, right? You're not leading with thought. You don't have potentially much experience in a particular subject matter, you don't have a large following. And so you sit down there. Top left, influencer. So when I say this can get misconstrued, but you can be seen as an influencer if you have a large enough following, and that's it. Influence in its basic term is that you can reach a wide array of people, but you might not have the substance behind you, the experience to talk in a particular subject, or you might be taking the approach of, slinging out hooks without that substance, as we've just been speaking about, but you do have the large audience. So top left. Bottom right of the quadrant, you've got subject matter experts. Subject matter experts are people with deep and wide experience in that subject matter. Engineers, sales coaches, marketers, IT professionals, whoever it might be. They have that deep and wide knowledge, expertise, but don't have a large following to have that influence on their ideas or on their new ways of thinking. If they have new ways of thinking, really just kind of, I know a lot about this subject, and if you have a question on this subject, I can answer you till the cows come home. And then top right, thought leader. Thought leader is the combination between deep and wide subject matter expertise and influence. Combined together, you can reach a vast array of people, and you know a great deal on a particular subject or a number of different subjects. And whether you're a nice person or not, you sort of fit into that category. That's the way that I see it. Might be wrong, but I like things in a nice little box, or in this case, 4 nice little boxes that make up one big box. So where is your mind on that breakdown, if you were able to sort of follow me on that visualization?
I do love a 2x2 matrix.
Okay.
That is fun.
That's good.
I think part of the reason that I actually
Compliment.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Seriously, because it's easy to put things into a quadrant. It's easier to understand 2 axes. It simplifies it. And I generally agree with where you've put people. I think that one struggle I have with the 2x2 version of this is that it misses what I think is a key piece, which is being prolific. And that's an element where, you've asked, you teed this up to say, how do you become a thought leader? How do you maintain your thought leadership? Being prolific is part of that, where you have to be speaking, you have to be writing, you have to be creating different types of content, sharing on different platforms. One, that helps get that message out there and it helps showcase your depth of ideas. 2, it actually gives you that feedback loop with the audience to be able to enhance or refine or build on your depth of ideas. And then 3, it actually feeds into that profile piece. If you're not sharing, how are you going to grow that audience? And so I actually think that that prolific pillar is integral into these things. The other thing that I think is a little bit difficult in the 2x2 style of this matrix, if you have basically, audience size as your y-axis and then ideas as your x-axis. If people are listening, they can't see that I've got my hands going every which way. There's 2 things on that. I think one, audience size alone is not necessarily indicative of having influence and engagement with that audience. And then 2, ideas in terms of depth of expertise in a particular, or 10 years of experience, or I've read all the books, or I have a degree in this, that does not get at the new and unique pieces that I think a thought leader requires. And so there is an element where a thought leader is actually not a combination of an influencer and a subject matter expert. It is actually a different type of person. And I think the other thing that's hard, I actually think that all 3 are valuable in the marketing mix. And I think frequently in kind of that 2x2 mindset, people glorify the thought leader and then denigrate the influencer or the subject matter expert. And then that's how thought leadership ends up being misused, because people are like, oh no, I'm not an influencer. Oh no, I'm more than a subject matter expert. Or in order for someone to be a valuable creator in the marketing mix, they can only be a thought leader. Therefore, we're going to call all of these people and all of these assets thought leadership. even though in fact, influencers and subject matter experts are helpful. I think the other piece of this that also gets missed in a more simplified matrix like that is where those other creators fit in the marketing mix. And so that messes up your metrics, it messes up your channels, it messes up the depth of narratives in your assets. And so that's why I think the pillars, that's why I've got 4 pillars that I'm like, several people have been like, oh, could we shift it into 3? Or are you sure it's not just these 2? And I'm like,
they're trying to change your model.
on one hand, you can talk about it however you want. On the other hand, I'm going to continue to talk about it how I want, because every time I try, it's heady, right? Like, it is dense and it's hard. But every time I try to strip away one of the pillars or I try to make it easier, I'm just like, that still isn't working. If I want to work with an influencer in the marketing mix, that's what I should do, because they serve a very specific audience and purpose. If I want to work with a SME, same thing. That's what I should do. I shouldn't conflate all of those 3 things, because they are quite different and the difference does matter.
Sure. And so let me just start by saying I wholeheartedly agree. And by no way was I trying to contribute to the negativity or the problem of thought leader up here, anything else is no good. That wasn't my intention. But I can see now that you've told me how my categorization of them in a quadrant how that might be perceived. So let me start by saying, noted, that's helped to articulate it for me. And that's going to become part of the way that I talk about things moving forward, because I completely agree with you. If you have the need for influencers across the marketing mix, the business ecosystem, the B2B sales cycle, whatever it might be, if you have the need for an influencer, they can be fantastic. If you have the need to be using subject matter experts within your organization that know what it is that you need in order to get a customer from one part of the buying cycle to the next, and that unlocks that stage, fantastic. You should certainly be doing that. I suppose where I'm coming from is if you're looking less looking at it as the head of marketing, the head of lifecycle marketing, and looking at an end-to-end sales and marketing journey and what needs to go where and how to piece them together. I suppose where I'm looking at it from is the individuals that are looking to become a thought leader and to ultimately pick which one that they want to be and go after it. And is there a way to work your way up a ladder, so to speak? Clearly defined guidelines, guardrails as to, okay, well, I can get all the followers that I want, but that doesn't make me a thought leader, right? Don't go chasing followers if what you want to become is a thought leader. But also, if you do arrive at thought leadership status, don't call yourself a thought leader, because that automatically, tells us that you're not one, right? So I think we might be saying the same. Well, actually, I don't think we're saying the same thing at all, but I think that there is a harmonious piece there in the way that you're coming at it from and where I'm coming at it from. So let's move on, because I don't know if we're going to kind of crystallize that. Let's get into your model. I think this is really, really rich. And I think you precursing that with how you're thinking about it as the head of lifecycle marketing, in terms of, I have these options. It's not just about thought leaders, subject matter experts, influencers. It's about everything that goes into making a campaign, a product, a service, a brand successful through what it is that you can have an influence on as the head of marketing. So zeroing in on your model from a thought leader perspective, then break it down for us. Tell us what the steps are, tell us what the pillars are, and give us a breakdown into each, because I think that's really the meat here.
So we have 4 pillars: credibility, profile, being prolific, and depth of ideas. So credibility is really about, do people believe you when you say things? Are you an expert? Do people think you know what the heck you're talking about? Some proof points in this case. One very specific shift that you'll see if you are low in this pillar, you'll be constantly asked to cite your sources. So who told you that? Where's the link to this? Do you have a source citation? As you move up, you'll see that shift to where you are cited. So people will start saying, oh, according to Ashley, according to Vinnie. Oh, have you seen what Ashley wrote? Vinnie actually talks about this, right? And then obviously in the middle, there's this sense of, you can say things and people just know, okay, you've got unquestioned knowledge of the source material. We don't need to ask you for a link. So that's an example of credibility. Profile. So this is the how well known are you? It's how many followers do you have? It's also about the nature of those followers. So if you're low in this pillar, the nature of those followers are people you've actually met or worked with. These are former coworkers. These might be personal friends. In contrast, when you're at the highest, a lot of people know you, but you don't know them. Also in the profile pillar is the types of audiences and outlets that you can reach. So you're getting quoted by tier one press. You're the main stage keynote speaker at a large industry conference versus just being a side panelist on, kind of the crappy slot on the last day of the conference right before lunch, right? And again, you'll start to see that change. You'll start to see the nature of inbound requests for podcasts, conferences, contributed articles, quotes. You'll also see your acceptance rate go up. So when you're very low on that profile pillar and no one really knows you, you're pitching and you're probably not getting accepted. Once you move up, there are a lot of inbound requests at much higher tier outlets for you to reach, again, because a lot of people know you and respect you. Then there's the the prolific pillar. So I'm very bullish on this one because this is the only one that's 100% in your control. You can't control 100% whether people think you're credible. You can't control whether somebody accepts your pitch or reaches out to you to come speak. You are 100% in control of how much content you create and publish. I do lay out some guidelines, and this does change depending on your industry and your craft, but you need to be putting out content regularly. You need to be posting on at least one social media platform regularly. You need to be posting different types of content. You need to be speaking. You need to be writing. Once people get to thought leadership status, they often have a book or like a seminal piece of content. Maybe they've got a course, a book, a TED Talk, like there's kind of a core set of things. So that's the prolific piece. And then last is depth of ideas. And this is where that kind of have thoughts piece comes in. So you got to be doing something new, novel, innovative. At the lowest level, this is probably on a tactical level where maybe you're just trying some new tactics. As you move up, you might start doing more strategic elements. You might start pulling in tactics or strategies from adjacent fields and combining those in new ways. And then at the top, and this is very hard, where you're like a visionary, you've invented a brand new thing, you've made a discovery, you're really pushing the forefront of your industry. And so all of the pillars work together in tandem, and you do move up in each pillar. So I get a lot of people saying, well, which pillar should I start with? Or which pillar is the hardest? And the answer is, well, which pillar are you weakest in? If you're red all the way across the bottom, I would actually start with looking at that being prolific pillar. Because again, it's 100% in your control. It'll help you start to think about what do I want to talk about? Do I have new stuff to say? Sometimes going through the motions of writing about problems that you're trying to solve helps you discover new ways to solve those problems. You're not going to be able to build an audience if you're not prolific, start posting. So if you're red all the way across the bottom, at minimum, start talking about your current challenges and current solutions in your current job on, again, I'm highly biased, but I would say on LinkedIn. If you're in B2B, that's going to be a great place for you to start. But doing that baseline exercise, and then there are tactics to grow in each thing. So from a depth of ideas perspective, this one I hear a lot. It's like the myth of the busy executive, where it's like, well, we're just too busy. So we're going to have someone ghostwrite, or we're going to just run it through AI and it's going to spit out a blog post. About what? In order for somebody to actually have thoughts, they have to have time to try something, experiment with it, fail, learn, do it again, optimize it, write that down, share it with somebody else. Somebody else has to try it, fail, learn, optimize, report back to whoever came up with this thing, and then kind of go through that cycle. And it's the same thing as the scientific process. This idea that we're going to magically cure cancer in one day, everyone realizes that that's nonsense. I don't know why we think that we're going to replace the entire funnel in one day, right? This model is another thing that I talk about. We know it's broken. Same thing with this thought leadership question. I didn't come up with this. I didn't sit down in an hour and come up with this thought leadership framework. I wrestled with this for a long time. I talked to people about it. I put some things out there. I got some feedback. I incorporated it, right? So if you actually want people to have depth of ideas, you have to give them time to experiment and learn and fail, and then codify that and test it over and over again. And then obviously that becomes fodder for you to write, speak, share to help show that credibility that like, hey, I've actually gone through and worked through this. I have all the experience. I have the credentials. I've worked through this myself, as you can see, because I've written about it or spoken about it in that prolific pillar. And I've shared about it externally to then build my pro. So you see, like once you get into it, it's like you can't just do one.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah. So let me just repeat back what I heard in bullet and sub bullet points, just to kind of summarize, and you tell me if I've got it right. So the first one, credibility, ultimately coming down to citations, how much you are cited as an individual in that particular subject matter. Correct?
Yes. I hesitate to say like it's all about citations, but yes, we'll say that. It's basically like, do people believe you when you say stuff?
Do people believe you when you say stuff backed up by citations?
Sure, backed up by citations.
I'm just trying to summarize it, but I know it doesn't always fit into a nice little box. But go with me. Okay, so credibility.
Yeah.
Do you know what you're talking about? A good way to prove that is, are you getting cited? Right?
Yeah.
Second one is profile. Not just about followership, but followership about, what are the other sub bullet points?
Yeah, so engagement, and then also I would say like prestige of the outlets. So
prestige of the
tier one press.
Right, that's right. Okay, so you've got
main stage of big conferences.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not just the size of the audience. I would also say it's the prestige of that.
The quality of the audience, right? So credibility, how much do you know, backed up by how much you are, how often or how much you are cited on that particular subject. Profile comes down to followership and ability to get the message out to publications, both of which your followers and those publications, how much quality they have behind them, right? Then prolific. Prolific comes down to, is the one that you ultimately are solely responsible for. And this one is all around content. Packaging up your thoughts, packaging up what it is that you've got to say, and pushing it out, getting going across at least one social media platform, one blog, one newsletter. Choose one at the very least. So how prolific you are. Is it right to say at this point that the more channels or outlets that you use, the more social media channels that you push this content out to? I know the answer that's going on in my head, but I'll ask you, does it matter? Are you more prolific the more channels?
I think it's a combination of both channels and content types. Mm-hmm. So if let's say you have a YouTube channel, but then you're basically just posting the exact same video on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn.
And not making it relevant to the platform and the audience.
Yeah. And if you're only doing video, you're missing out if you're not doing conferences, podcasts, long form written content, short form written content, visual content. If you're not doing different types, you're probably missing out on some of the depth of ideas piece as well, because you're just doing one type of content. So I'd say it is the mix of asset types and channels.
It's content and format and channels, right? Okay. Yeah. And then number four,
kind of that full distribution piece.
That's right. Yeah. And then number four, depth of ideas, your experience, how much of a visionary you are. Just circumvent that for me. Depth of ideas. Am I right in saying that it's experience and how much or how little of a visionary you are?
Yep. I think I would tweak it a little bit to say that it's really about the ideas. Experience, I think, feeds into that credibility piece. I think the ideas are kind of the core in the depth of ideas. I know it's a slightly circular reference, but in terms of like the novelty of the ideas.
Okay. I mean, because a lot of that does come down to subjectability. Like, for example, I've gone viral before, and I've gone viral for what I would determine as a little bit of fluffy stuff, right? No real reason as to why people are picking it up. But then I've gone viral for things that I'm proud of. In particular, the idea that brand is another word for reputation. That video that I actually shared with you about a month ago has gone viral, and a lot of people are picking it up. But it is subjective. You get people that kind of come back and say, I'm not sure if you can make the connection between the two. I can see this, I can see that, and da-da-da-da-da. But this is all part of the testing and the iterating and putting stuff out there. What do you say to people that hear what you say around, well, Rome wasn't built in a day. We're not curing cancer in a week. You need to have the time to play, pick apart, and put it out there and test some of these things, report back, get your findings, gather the data, go back, iterate, come back to the audience and test it again. All of this for a lot of subjectivity in terms of responses. I mean, you don't make yourself I'm going to make a bold statement. You don't make yourself a thought leader. Others do. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting, your comment about subjectivity. I think that there are a lot of people who, over the years in their various fields, are well-known, well-respected, frequently are again, that citation standpoint of like, this person is pushing the forefront. This person has come up with something new. So yes, I agree there's an element of subjectivity to it, but I do think that when you make people say, I haven't thought of it that way, or this is super interesting. I haven't actually ever heard it framed this way, or like, this is this is new to me. This is useful to me. That is the validation that it's interesting, right? And so I think that's the piece where, yes, it's subjective, but again, if you're saying something where everybody is just like, I agree, okay, it's probably not that new. And and again, to your point about going viral, you can go viral with something that is not new. If you say something like stand-up comedians, actually, a core part of the reason why they're so funny is because they say true things that everybody feels, but that no one actually is allowed to say.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've seen several things from a marketing standpoint where there was one today actually on LinkedIn. Somebody was like, turns out the most effective call to action is skip ad.
Right.
And I was like, dude, you want to see the channel that really converts?
Yeah.
Let me tell you about DocuSign.
Yeah, right.
I send that contract over and boom, revenue. And of course, everybody laughs and everyone's like, that's actually true. DocuSign is the best converting channel, right? That is clearly not a thought leadership statement. That's clearly tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
I've said that in various formats. People laugh and they're like, that's a good point about DocuSign, right? But that's clearly not thought leadership, right? So there's an element of it where, yes, it's subjective, but it's kind of funny that we all do seem to agree that there is a certain class of ideas that are better than the quippy DocuSign is my highest converting channel.
Yeah. The interesting thing I just want to quickly jump on is the interesting thing about comedians, the best comedians. So you're absolutely right. Comedians have great standout ability by being able to articulate and deliver a thought, a feeling that we innately feel, know, and see existing in our own lives, but don't talk about, and they bring it to life. But the other interesting thing about the best comedians is that they take their material around smaller comedy shows to test their content to see what sticks and what resonates the best, so that when they get on the big stage, they have a tried and tested set. And I'm not saying that to denigrate anything that you said. If anything, it backs up, the testing, the iteration of what is required to be done in order to give yourself a chance of being seen as a thought leader, to get yourself onto that stage, to get in front of a larger audience, to then pick up a small percentage of those people who start citing you. If you strike the right chords, consistency is in there, authenticity is in there, relevance is in there, right? And so this is just a fascinating topic. And I'm looking at the time and I'm going, Jesus, where did that hour go? So, okay, really quickly, I want to know, based on your breakdown, you've mentioned at the beginning that based on your own modeling, the numbers show that you are in fact not a thought leader. So where do you come? How does the scoring process work really quickly? Is it points 1 to 10? And give us what your scores are, if you're happy to share.
I actually do it more of a color system because I will say some of this is relative to an industry. My model is specifically based on kind of that B2B thought leader. So obviously, if you're doing your PhD in some obscure science, like publishing your paper and having 10 people read it is actually a huge accomplishment, I'm told. The joke about how many people read your PhD dissertation as an example. So I actually do it more of a color system. And then I do give some detailed guidelines around, you've got to have, if you got less than 1,000 followers on social media and you're speaking to audiences, of less than 100 in person, you're pretty low on that profile piece. So I do basically like red, yellow, and green. And then obviously if you're yellow in an area, it's like, okay, you're starting to make progress. And then obviously if you're green in that area, you're solid. So
okay,
I would say
red
that
is low, yellow is mid, and green is what? Topping.
Yeah, green is like you're solid at this level. So I do actually do it. It's kind of like there's 3 levels, and then you can be red, yellow, or green in each level. So it's almost like a kind of a gradient little slider.
Traffic light system. Yeah, we got it.
Exactly. So for me, I would say from a credibility standpoint, I would say I'm kind of green in the middle. I have unquestioned knowledge of the source material. I am starting to get cited, but I do still get occasionally people asking me like, did you come up with this? Or like, how did you, who came up with this? And I'm like, no, I came up with this. And they're like, oh, you did. And I'm like, yep. My framework. So that is indicative that I don't have the credibility. If somebody is still, and it comes up enough that people that ask me, where did you come up with this? Where can I read more about it? Who else is talking about this? Indicates that I'm not at that highest level of credibility, but everybody agrees that like I have unquestioned knowledge about my source material. I am an expert in marketing. I'm an expert in this topic. Profile, I would say that I am yellow in the middle. Like I'm starting to get there from a follower perspective, particularly, in the marketing space. I have currently a little over 15,000 followers only on LinkedIn. I have, a low following on Twitter. I have no following on Instagram. I don't have a YouTube account at all or TikTok, right? I don't have a newsletter. So I am well known among a certain circle, but I still don't get main stage keynotes. In general, my hit rate, if I'm pitching something, I have a pretty good hit rate. I've appeared at prestigious conferences like Inbound, but I'm not the main stage at Inbound. I'm not getting quoted in, tier 1 press, right? My pitch acceptance rate is, I'd have to look at what my hit rate is lately, but so that's where I would say I am on the profile piece, is kind of in that yellow, kind of going to green in the middle. Prolific, I am very strong in the prolific pillar. I write a lot. I speak a lot. I'm on podcasts. I share in a variety of different formats. So I am quite strong on the profile pillar. And then depth of ideas. This one is interesting. I do think there's an element of like being kind of humble about this because I've been talking about this stuff for a while. So to me, I would say that I'm like yellow in the middle on depth of ideas. I've had friends, colleagues, peers, other industry people push back on that and say like, no, you're like solidly green on that. These ideas are interesting and new. So either way, if you put me a green in the middle or yellow in the middle, that still means that like, okay, I haven't fully gotten to the top to be green. And I would actually say, to be an effective thought leader, or realistically for most of us, we're not going to get to green all the way at the top. We're not going to be a visionary. We're not going to be, effectively a marketing celebrity, right? But you do need to be at that highest level from a credibility standpoint. You do need to be very solid on the profile piece. You do need to be green, like solidly green on the, middle for that depth of ideas. And I would say that I'm still yellow on a couple of those things.
So, okay, so that's interesting. So the scoring system, so just so I'm super clear, based on your scoring system, you don't need to be at the top end of the green for each one in order to have other people call you a thought leader, because you can't call yourself one, right? So you do have to be at the top of the green, or you don't necessarily have to be at the top of the green based on your scoring system?
Yeah. So, I mean, ideally you would be at the top of the green, but I think that there are a lot of people who are called thought leaders who are not at the very top green level in every single pillar, just because it's really hard to like invent something new, it's really hard to be super well known across all pockets of an industry. Like, again, you think of someone like Seth Godin or even Ann Handley, like there's people who don't know who she is if they're not in the content marketing side of the house.
Yeah.
There's other folks who someone has maybe named to me that I'm like, sorry, I don't know who that is. And it's because they're in marketing ops, right? And like, that's not really my core area versus like Seth Godin, like people know Seth Godin.
Yeah.
At least I assume. As I say that, and you might be looking at me being like, I don't know who Seth Godin is. And now I'm like, and there it is.
Confirming I know who Seth Godin is.
Yeah. Okay. Whew. So like, he's a perfect example, right? Like Seth Godin. And the funny part is I don't think he's as prolific now because he was so prolific throughout his career. I think he's actually taking some well-deserved space of like, I don't have to speak every single place. I don't have to put out a book a year. I don't have to be on every social media platform, right? He did that for a while. But he's not doing that as much anymore. So, but like everybody knows who he is. So it's really hard to get to that level of notoriety, even within your field, let alone
and take a year off,
adjacent
right? And then be able to
take
take a year off and still maintain some level of status.
Exactly.
And this is where I wanted to get to. So to kind of draw a line in the sand for this conversation, we've established that there is a point system. We have established that, there is subjectivity, but also things that you can do in order to keep making your way up the ladder. But I think the key thing here is that unless you are Seth Godin, consistency is absolutely key in order to maintain any level of status as a thought leadership status, because otherwise you become forgotten. And that is what is so intriguing about this topic, is that, and probably the reason why you should never call yourself a thought leader if you do become one, that other people are calling you one, because all of a sudden, if you don't keep it up, if you don't stay on top of your knowledge, if you don't stay pushing stuff out, if you don't continue to grow your followership, or if you don't continue to spend the time on digging deep, going into the depths of your mind and exploring new ideas around subject matter that you want to talk about, you can lose that status. And so
it's true. And I think like this is where that truly like visionary piece at the very top, like this has come up frequently, right? Where people are like, I don't think the 4 P's of marketing are relevant anymore. I think it's the 7 C's, or I think it's the 5 P's, or the 4 P's are fine, but we're missing a core piece, right? And to have marketers come back and be like, I know what the 4 P's are. I'm going to defend the 4 P's. They're still relevant. Like that's hard to do, right? And even if you look at like Serious Decisions, right, where they've come out with, there's like now a bow tie model for the funnel. There's like they've changed up some of the things around like loosen the status quo, and like, right, there's
an infinity flow, which
there's the infinity loop, right?
Yeah.
So even the think tanks, where like this is, I mean, that's what Serious is. They're a think tank. They've been acquired by Forrester, right? But their whole job is to define the models that people use to have shared language and to have measurement and how people are thinking and buying and all of that. And even they change or evolve those models every, 5 to 15 years because stuff changes, right? So for you to truly come up with something that you can just rest on your laurels for like 100 years or even 50 years or 20 years, there are very few people who do that. And yes, you might be a well-known person in your space, but if you have not continued to evolve, you're not going to continue to be a relevant voice in that conversation. And I think and that's okay. You might choose to step away. You don't have to keep doing that. And you can still get a ton of value and you can make a ton of money from the work that you did a decade ago. But it is a constant practice. It's not a destination. And I think that's another piece that people are like, cool, I get to the top and then I win.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, this is actually, this is a practice. And again, this is why I say like being an influencer, being a subject matter expert, or just like having a job that you clock in and out of, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to be a thought leader if you don't want to be, right? Like, so I think that's the other thing is when people use this as a value judgment versus, or like a thing that you win versus a journey and a practice and a way to build yourself from a progression or career standpoint, and or a way to build your brand from a progression and affinity and conversion standpoint. Like there's a lot of nuance to it. And I think that's the other piece of this of like, don't take the model as like, I have to get to green. And then once I do, I'm done. Okay, I win.
Yeah.
That's not at all what I built this to be.
Yeah, just looping all this back, and there's so much more that I want to dig into. We'll have to do it another time. But bringing this back to the very beginning where we spoke about, thought leadership is a phrase or a term that is so loosely bandied about in terms of let's do some thought leadership stuff, right? Let's do a thought leadership campaign. Let's make some thought leaders in our business. But actually what goes into becoming a thought leader is all the stuff that we spoke about. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. But most importantly, it's not a destination, it's a journey. And you have to continue to be there, to continue to show up. You have to continue. And if that is not something that you have the time for, the patience for, don't bother trying to start in the first place, perhaps.
I hate to discourage people who want to try, but I think it is good to go into it with open eyes to understand what you're getting yourself into.
We're playing good cop, bad cop a little bit here, but I suppose just to kind of say, just be mindful that if you're going to do it, you got to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And if you're not prepared to, then maybe, I don't know, consider alternatives. Ashley, on that note, we're going to finish there. It's been absolutely fantastic. I want to get you back on again. There's so many more questions that I have for you, so many different areas of this. We barely scratched the surface. And I hope that the audience has gotten vast amount of value from just this hour's session. Thanks so much for coming on. And it's been incredible.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ashley.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Liza Maywald and Alexander Hipwell. It was edited by Dave Samito with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Liza and Alexander. Special thanks to Tina Wabe, we couldn't make this show without you. This episode was hosted by Vinnie Romano. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to know more about Growth Colony, check out our newsletter and subscribe with the link in the pod description. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just interested in a chat? Send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. Or fill out the form in the description. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week right here on Growth Colony.